If you've ever been transgender, you've probably found shopping can be an experience. Clothes. How do you find them? What fits? What's affordable? What's accessible? What's going to look hot squeezing past some ineffable non-binary comedian to the stairs down to the basement to the glory? What fits? Fashion is expression. The shirt I put on my back wafts signals out into the world about what sort of person I am, or what sort of person I want people to perceive me to be. Clothes are comfort and confidence, utility and euphoria, selectively curated manifestations of the self. I love clothes. Finding them can be challenging. I'm really bad at shopping. A few years ago, I'd have told you without hesitation that I hate it. It's draining. I usually end up with a headache of dysphoria, decision paralysis, dysmorphia, and dehydration. But I have found tools lately that have made clothes shopping a more accessible experience for me, which helps me to craft myself as the radiant creature you see before you now. I'm Kit Maguire, and this is a queer's history of shopping. This is the first pair of boxers that I ever bought for myself. I was living with my parents at the time, and I got them on a 3-pack from my hometown's big Tesco. I had only ever told 3 people my nefarious thoughts of gender divergence, but I was about to leave for a 2-month acting job that would allow me to leave the nest for that period. It occurred to me as I was looking for socks that I could buy myself some boxers. It was a small choice. It was a small affirmation kept closely to myself under my Dead Name Drag Act for another year. This is 2 boxer buys later. I treated myself with encouragement from my then partner, and I honestly think buying these pants changed my life. I still had mostly women's underwear, although I'd updated a large portion of the rest of my wardrobe and was out to nearly everybody. I thought a lot about buying a big pack of boxers and getting rid of the remaining stock of girl pants, but I spent a long time not doing it. There was something intimidating about the stack of men's pants on the floor of TK Maxx, and I think the other guys could smell my fear. Kay Tempest put it rightly in On Connection. Non-acknowledgement of the full spectrum of a person's interior life by that person themselves makes it that much easier to mute the parts that are inconvenient. Each morning, as I got dressed, I would blur out the dysphoria of my underwear the same way I'd blur out my chest. In Performative Acts and Gender Construction, Judith Butler argues that gender is something you do. The various acts of gender creates the idea of gender. Without those acts, there would be no gender at all. Getting dressed is one of our key modes of performance. Not to say that clothes dictate gender, but they certainly have a meaningful relationship. Costume creates character. Your gait is affected by the cut of your trousers. A corset makes demands of your posture. In the All the World's a Stage performance of gender, that costume runs right down to your underwear. In years gone by, that would include petticoats and stays, ankle-length underpants before we got to your boxer. A year ago, my underwear included one of these. All things that really do affect how you hold yourself. Whatever we're layering on top, underwear creates the shape of self that we carry about into the world. With my girl pants, I was refusing to look at my answer to the crucial question, on what foundations are you building? I kept the tab for these open in my browser. There's a safety to online shopping. Moving about the world, I find I am simultaneously hyper-aware of and have no idea how I am being perceived. Sometimes I'm convinced I'm very obviously trans, other times I think I pass for a cis guy. I know I'm often mistaken for a cis woman. In my pre-T, pre-op days, I didn't pass even a little bit, and clothes shopping was about minimizing time spent talking to employees. Nobody on the shops on my computer is calling me miss. When I'm shopping for clothes, I'm usually pretty utility focused. I'll have a piece in mind or a gap in my wardrobe that needs to be filled. My work trousers have worn out. My shoes have fallen apart on the way back from Lidl. That's happened twice. Point is, I know what I'm looking for. So, like with the boxes, I can have multiple tabs open, cross-referencing style, price, reviews, and that's usually the order I'll do it in. I'll be scrolling, aside from sorting price low to high, and see what catches my eye. And then I'll check the price. And then I'll get disillusioned and go back and scroll back up a little bit and then find something else. And then see if they have my size and if the reviews are good. The downside of online shopping for me as a tactile person, though, is I do like to know how things feel. Returning items is that much more of a pain. You can never be quite sure of sizing. Also, although I do find real-world shopping draining, there is something undeniably fun about being taken by surprise by a garment. In person, I'm much more likely to be drawn to whatever is happening over there. I didn't need distraction for these, though. I needed the accessibility of hitting go on the order as soon as I worked up the nerve. Owning them taught me that solid foundations are worth the investment. I wore these boxers during my top surgery. I'm going to put some more clothes on. Oversizing is a staple of styling across the board. From a queer perspective, I can certainly understand the appeal. I have often lent into the type of styling that Hope Forey describes in Tailoring Gender, the Past, Present and Future of Queer Dress as potato sack androgyny. A silhouette that hides a multitude of sins and secondary sex characteristics. Around the time I got this, most of the shirts I owned or bought were oversized, specifically to drown out my chest and give me a boxier silhouette. I bought this on a trip with a friend a few summers ago. That is, I found another way to make clothes shopping a more palatable experience. Bring a friend. Bring multiple friends. Have a giggle and a coffee. We found this in a vintage shop on Brick Lane. I very rarely buy clothes new. Charity shops are my go-to, more so than vintage. Pickings can be slim and bizarre. When I am shopping with a vibe in mind rather than a piece, I'll still usually be looking for things I don't have. I ask myself what I find interesting on other people. I take inspiration from my friends, my tattoo artists, Roger Taylor in 1974. And then I play a little flash dress-up game in my head with what I know I have and what I'm holding in my hand to make an outfit. It's much more difficult to find something you can be happy with when you place arbitrary restrictions on yourself. When I bought this, it had sleeves. Not long sleeves, but sleeves nonetheless. I think this was the second shirt I de-sleeved. I did it with a stitch unpicker this time, rather than scissors. It's a bit thready, but that's fine. Before I started cutting the sleeves off my shirts, I was very much thinking of clothes that I shopped for as finished. Did you know you can do whatever you want with your clothes? I'm not a tailor, I don't have any degree of skill in sewing, but I can stitch a bit, and I can dye things, and bleach things, and cut things, and put patches on things, and paint things. This wasn't the first thing I adjusted. I had a faux leather jacket covered in patches, a denim jacket I painted. You get the idea. Let's talk about trousers. So, I'm trans. I have the hips I have. I know this isn't just a me issue. I know this isn't just a trans issue. I personally know several cis guys who have hips and thighs that fail the expectations of sample size. Still, it's a garment ripe for dysphoria. Pre-op, I could always throw an oversized shirt over my well-taped chest, and now shirts just fit. T has adjusted my hip-to-shoulder ratio, but I don't have skinny legs, and I'm never going to. They don't fit right in men's trousers. Or they do, but there's something off. I don't know where my waist is supposed to go. It's the not knowing that's worse, I think. If I don't know what right looks like or feels like, how am I supposed to find it? I'll show you. I wear women's jeans. They fit better, so they're more comfortable. I figure if I can cross the bounds of biological sex, I can cross-section shop. Now, this is a look that gets me quite misgendered, but I like it. It's summery, it's comfortable, it's cute. Butler argues that gender is a stylized repetition of acts. This could very well be the style that we repeat as we put ourselves out into the world. What act am I performing if I'm dressing like this and 90% of the people I encounter think this kind of clothing qualifies woman? Is that different? I went to a talk on writing and subversion. The idea was raised about creating for the standardized man in your head. Sometimes when I'm getting ready for work, I have to ask myself, am I dressing for the cis guy who comes in for a flat white? The days I do, I end up looking like this. I find myself stuck between affirmation and expression. Earlier in my transition, affirmation was that much more crucial. I got called he so infrequently that the times I did, I was texting my friends about it, and it took considerable effort to achieve. I'd watch my cis man friends scope out how they constructed their outfits. All my study wouldn't make my hips fit any better in a man's jean, but I did my best. I wasn't passing, but I was trying to signal that I was trying to pass, trying to make my audience as aware of my performance of gender as I was, so that maybe they'd be respectful of it. All of this 3D chess could be packed down into another little box. As Forry says, the ways that we style ourselves within the code of the gender binary act as a form of self-policing through clothing. So, how do I stop being such a cop about it? I can't minimize the effect of medical transition on my comfort within myself and within the world. I would be doing you a disservice to suggest that it's about taking a chill pill when really it's about taking copious amounts of testosterone. But it is true that I needed to loosen up, by which I mean release my grip on some fallacies that I had deeply internalized. Dressing like a man did and does achieve affirmation. But joy is that much more achievable when my focus is on expression. I dress now like me, and I am no more a fixed identity than gender is. I am shaped differently from every other transmasculine person, and also from me a year ago and me a year from now. My stylized repetition of acts is not a canon, but a fugue. My performance of myself can be reinterpreted, translated, adapted. Getting dressed is an opportunity to re-realize myself. Shopping is an insistence that I do. When I asked earlier about the button, I wasn't being facetious. Do you think this is different from this? What about another one? How much attention can I draw to my chest? Another thing I can do is adjust my waist so my hips sit a little lower, tuck my shirt in more, try to create sort of that V shape, loose and wide at the shoulders, narrow at the hips. Thank you, testosterone. In Queering Drag, Meredith Heller says that if a performer displays identities, bodies, or actions that are out of sync with hegemonic cultural formations of the natural, normal, or ideal, then the act is bent. By drawing attention to my chest, I'm not just showing you my lack of cleavage, I'm showing you my scars. This body is out of sync with hegemonic cultural formations of the normal. This act is bent. And not because of the garments, but because of how my specific body interacts with them. We're at an exciting point in high street fashion where we're starting to see the barriers between men's and women's sections breaking down. Not everywhere, of course, but there are an increasing number of brands and lines that refer to themselves as gender neutral. Many of them utilize this potato sack silhouette, but as Forry says, it's a silhouette that pushes gender variance towards aesthetic singularity. There's no room for bodily manipulation when it just conceals the body. The performance of gender, and thus the queering of that performance, is reliant on the conversation between the body and the outfit. So what's queerer than this? I bought this years ago. It's Ted Baker. I remember picking it up in a TK Maxx and knowing I should be impressed by the label and thus by the discount. I tried it on. I liked the fabric. I liked the discount. The last time I wore this outside of my bedroom was a New Year's party. My life was a completely different shape, and so was my body. But I have kept it. When I stand in front of my mirror, I experience what Strider Naimanis and Rachel Lowen Walker describe as thick time. I look and I experience every version of myself I have ever been or may yet be, layered densely with who I am in this moment. In order to feel how the fit of the dress has changed, I must remember how it used to fit. I experience the broadening of my shoulders because I recall the specific sensation of their once narrower frame. I remember how it felt to see myself. Forry says we must acknowledge the past in order to imagine queer futurity. If, as Butler says, gender is an identity tenuously constituted in time, then we can use a garment's history to set the clock. This dress was not queer when I bought it. How about now? Will it be queer in another few years when my facial hair really kicks in? Aside from personal history, queer styling relies on the history of the garment itself. This is a dress. It is a garment imbued with femininity. Its construction aims to produce a silhouette that highlights curves I am losing, a chest I had surgically removed, and legs I am keeping. Again, I appear to be wearing women's clothes. Part of my process for writing this video was playing dress up in my room. It struck me, trying on this outfit, that I felt more like a man after I put on the heels. These are another ancient pre-hatchling purchase, and combined with the dress, they produce a very classically feminine outfit. Heller says that queer identifies actions that have the explicit intent of spoiling or ruining cultural norms. This dress and these shoes are a cultural norm, which I cut into pieces by occupying it with my body. I do not attempt to mollify the juxtaposition by adding classically masculine elements of dress. Rather, the shoes draw the eye to my legs, my satisfyingly hairy, partially tattooed legs. Maybe it's just being taller. I believe, though, that queer styling must make allowance for context. Who is looking at me in the dress? Where are we? Because a look like this at the RVT gets me he-himmed. Conversely, my normal dude look for my cishet morning commute customers would have me welcome at she. Even when my focus is on expression, I find I hound myself with questions about how people might look at me. All of us do, each to our own extent and with our own focus or focuses, gender, economic status, social circles, profession, geographical origin. A friend of mine texts me a photo of her outfit and asks if she looks North London or what. Do you care about looking clean when you leave the house? To whom? In On Freedom, Maggie Nelson talks about creating as if we're not under surveillance. While we can never be free of surveillance of some kind, that doesn't mean we don't have a real need to produce spaces or forms wherein we can temporarily suspend its grip. Alone in my room, it's still important to me that I'm wearing boxers. Just as the history of a garment can help us to build queer looks in queer context, it allows us to conscientiously create our gendered acts for our gendered performance, even when I'm the only one in the audience. I have endless conversations with myself over the ever-shifting Venn diagram of affirmation and expression. My reflection and I try to work out what makes me feel good. That's what I'm trying to create, unsurveilled. What makes me feel good today? Some answers to that question are consistent. This is my suit. It's blue. I bought it online, again years ago, and again, like the boxers, it felt the only way I could get myself a suit was online. There's a sort of buffer layer of reality when shopping online. It's like it doesn't really exist. I've spent the money, but I don't have the garment. The package arrives, but it's just brown cardboard and an address label. The suit didn't exist until I'd cautiously unpacked it in a room with a closed door, even though I was the only one in the house. At the time, safety lived in plausible deniability. Nobody had seen the suit except for me, my mirror, and whoever had processed my order, so it didn't exist outside of that room. I took a gamble on the sizing. I didn't even know how to measure myself properly, but my mirror certainly knew I existed. Knew the suit existed. There was a family reunion back when I was binding. Now this was made with a flat chest in mind. I like performing. I'm an actor. But there is something nice about going to a wedding not in drag. This is easy. There are many elements of queer styling for which ease is not my priority. Dancing for 4 hours at the RVT in these is not easy, but it is fun and it is hot. Shirts, jackets, shoes, you name it. I will put myself in uncomfortable clothing for the sake of a look. I will endure the tightrope walk over the gulf of dysphoria in dressing rooms if I think I can make a garment work. I just need to know if it fits. But a suit, I don't even have to think about it. It's definitely still me, the colour, the shirt, I'm a fop and I know it. But also I'm just a guy in a suit. I've got all the time in the world for discussions and dissections of gender and transition and cisnormativity and identity versus expression versus presentation and queering of narratives and perceptions and styles, but also sometimes I get dressed and it's just nice. There's something about the expectation of formal wear, not on you, but on the event. If I'm dressing like this, the point is the wedding, or the awards, the fundraising. Something is happening that we've all agreed to look nice for, and in owning a suit, I know how to achieve that. It's a euphoria that's very quiet and completely saturates me. I think I'd like to go shopping. I think I'd like to buy another suit. One that really exists from the moment I set my eyes on it.